This is Football Night in America, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Football Night in America podcast. Maria Taylor alongside Matthew Berry, Mike Florio, and Jason Garrett here with you. Devin McCourty has skipped out on us yet again, but we're still going to give you our takeaways for Week 15. Let's start with what we saw in Detroit. Josh Allen putting on a superhuman, superhero, Superman show as they get the victory on the road in a place that we thought it was impossible to win, Matthew.
They look great. There's a little bit of you're like, how many times can Josh Allen put on his Superman cape and win a game for the Bills? But so far, it's working. Give the Bills credit. They ran the ball well. They threw the ball well, obviously. Josh had an amazing game here as well. This offense is rolling, Maria. They are the 5th team in NFL history to score 30 or more points in 8 straight games. Here's some of the other teams. It's the 2007-2010 Patriots. That's Tom Brady, his 50 touchdown year, Randy Moss, the whole thing. It's 2013 Denver. That's Peyton Manning, the 50 touchdown year. That's 2000 Rams, the greatest show on turf. I mean, that's the level this offense is playing at. And Detroit made a couple of big runs here, and the Buffalo Bills withstood it and came away with a big victory.
Yeah, if Josh Allen is Superman, the defense is, with all due respect, a bunch of Clark Kents, and they better hit the phone booth before the playoffs roll around, because all it takes is one game.
Yeah.
When you're ringing up those kind of points and allowing those kind of points, if another team just takes away a little bit of what you're doing, that's it. That's my big concern. They have to figure something out on defense, Coach.
Yeah, certainly they've struggled a little bit here lately, but to me, when you watch this game, it's 35-14 at one point in this game. So a lot of the yards and a lot of the points that Detroit got happened at the end of the game in a desperation mode. Goff threw it 59 times, so it certainly was not the style of game that Detroit wanted to play. But back to that Buffalo offense, I just love offenses that attack different ways. And for me, we talk about Josh putting on the Superman cape, but he did that a lot the last few years. He's done that a lot less for me the last year and a half since Joe Brady has taken over. They're balanced. James Cook is involved every week. 9 different receivers again this week caught balls. So Josh makes his amazing plays, but it's not like he's putting the whole city of Buffalo on his back. Other guys are contributing on that offense and making a lot of plays around him too, and they're hard to stop.
And I'll just say this, Coach. Coming into this game, the Lions were one of the toughest defenses in the NFL against the run. And the Rams go in there, they average over almost 6 yards a carry, 34 for 197. Now, Josh Allen gets 68 of those, but James Cook ran well. They got a little bit of contribution from Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. They took it to Detroit. That is not an easy defense to run on, especially on the road. So credit Joe Brady, credit the Buffalo Bills for just finding different ways to put the ball into the end zone.
The Lions' defense, the injuries may be hitting critical mass. A couple more guys today. Carlton Davis, cornerback, feared to be done for the year. Alan McNeil, feared to be done for the year. At some point, it's too many. And the other thing that I thought was weird, Coach, and we've talked about this, aggressive for the sake of aggressive and setting aside what's in the best interest of the team. That onside kick, when they're down 10 with like 12 minutes left in the game, that's too early to be trying to play that's got a low single-digit success rate percentage-wise. I thought that was a big mistake, and it showed no faith in the defense.
Yeah, for me, way too early by Dan, and he's an aggressive guy, and that's been their calling card for the last few years in Detroit. But I think what you said at the end, it did not show any faith in the defense. It was saying, hey, we have to get this ball back, steal a possession, because there's no way we're stopping that guy, number 17, and his group of merry men. So, I didn't like the call. I would have kicked it deep, see if your guys can rise up and play the game that way. Maybe the next time out you get into that 7 or 6 minute area, it's a different story, but too early for me.
One question I have here is, did the Lions potentially lose home field advantage with this game? Because we're going to talk about the Eagles in a second, but just look at the Lions' upcoming schedule, right? At Chicago next week, then at San Francisco, home to Minnesota. Chicago, okay, we'll see, but on the road at San Francisco and home to Minnesota, those are no pushover games. And when you look at the Eagles' upcoming schedule, it's a little bit easier. And so I wonder if we look back in a couple of weeks and say, wow, that was a really pivotal game for the Lions.
And that game at Chicago, it'll only be their second game outdoors all year. And Jared Goff had a nightmare in Chicago that year the Rams went to the Super Bowl in 2018. Horrible performance. Now, he played well outdoors at Green Bay, but if it's cold, if it's nasty in Chicago, even with Chicago out, that becomes a challenge for the Lions.
The big question for the Lions, though, is can their defense hold up enough? Regardless of who they're playing, where they're playing, when they're playing, that's the question down the stretch.
Okay, let's talk about the Eagles. You kind of brought them up for a second, and we all kind of talked about them throughout the week with the conversations between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Is there an issue, a trouble in paradise, the passing game? And we saw in this game, they got the ball to A.J. Brown early. We saw the kid in play celebration. We heard him talking after in the locker room. What do you think is your takeaway to all the controversy that we've dealt with for the last week?
It's amazing, and Devin and I were joking about this in the screening room. It's always the media's fault when the media happens to notice something that seems off with the team. How dare we
and you always
see that thing? As I've told you before, I got a business to run. But how dare we point it out? And then so they circle the wagons. And they find a way to get on the same page. I thought it was so funny this week when they asked A.J. Brown about his relationship with Jalen Hurts. He says, we're good. Like, how is that a normal response for somebody you truly have strong positive feelings for? Yeah, we're good. So, but credit to them for finding a way to put it behind them and taking care of a dangerous Steelers team that hadn't won in Philadelphia since 1965. And we'll have to wait another 8 years, or maybe they'll get lucky and they'll have a shot within that. But, yeah, the Eagles quieted everyone else who was just daring to point out the fact that something was wrong with inside their house.
A huge part of your job as a head coach is to provide everyone in the building with perspective. And I'm sure when Nick Sirianni went into the team meeting on Monday after last week's game, he reminded everybody that Philadelphia had won 9 straight games. And if they won this week, it would be the first time they've ever done that in their storied history of playing football in Philadelphia. So I think that probably got everybody recentered again. I would have bet the house, that A.J. Brown was going to catch a lot of balls early. Very intentional. I love what Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, said. We're going to increase the probability that A.J. gets the ball. We don't want to destroy Jalen's, the purity of him reading through his progressions, but they made sure that A.J. was the first option. He threw the ball early with confidence to A.J. A.J. made it pay off. And again, we've talked a lot about Philly. They're a balanced team. They're physical. There are not a lot of holes throughout that whole football team. Yeah. Hard to beat.
Yeah, I think the easiest bet, the actual wager this week was A.J. Brown to catch a pass on the first drive, and that did in fact cash. So, you talk about Jalen Hurts, and I know there's been some criticism of like they're super conservative, they're running a little bit, and I think obviously very impressive game by him today against a tough Steelers defense. During this win streak, Coach, 26 total touchdowns, just 3 turnovers for Jalen Hurts. Like, he is playing within that offense really, really well. Credit Kellen Moore for coming in there, finding out what Jalen Hurts does well and making it bounce. Having Saquon Barkley helps a lot. Yeah. Your offense looks a lot better when you can give it a 26 sometimes, but I thought they looked really balanced. I'm a lifelong, as you guys all know, anyone that's ever watched me for a minute knows, I'm a lifelong Commanders fan, so it pains me to say this. I think they're the best team in the NFL. I think top to bottom. Now, they need to stay healthy. That's what they've done so far this year. And Saquon Barkley got a little bit banged up in this game. If he were to suddenly miss some time, I would feel differently about this Eagles team. But in a game in which Barkley didn't have a huge game, they got A.J. Brown going. Devontae Smith got going as well. Remember, no Dallas Goedert in this game for that Eagles pass offense. And still, and they shut down the Steelers offense. Now, the Steelers were missing George Pickens. Struggles there offensively on the passing game for Pittsburgh. But I thought this was a complete win by Philadelphia.
Well, you mentioned Barkley. Hang on one second.
You go.
Very briefly. Mm-hmm. He said after the game he was dealing with something. He wouldn't say what. And then A.J. Brown went down awkwardly with a kind of a hip drop thing, ankle. And so far, no indication anything seriously wrong, but a couple of things to watch.
Yeah, a cliche. Since the beginning of time, you win the game up front. They're really, really good on the offensive line. Elite players up there. They play well together. Run blocking, pass protection. They are elite on the defensive line. How many guys they have in there to stop the run, rush the quarterback. So week in and week out, they're winning the line of scrimmage, and that's given them a heck of a chance to win the game.
That's always the recipe to be a special team. Offensive line, defensive line. We don't notice the offensive linemen. We notice everybody else generating all the yards and the points. But you have a great offensive line, great defensive line, you're going to go far.
And the organizations that are willing to make the unsexy picks, to put resources to your offensive line. Look at Detroit. Detroit's got 4 first-round picks on their offensive line. Oh, why is their offense so good? It starts there, right? So, and Philadelphia's done that. give Howie and those guys a lot of credit for how they've built that team.
Zach Martin when you could have had Johnny Manziel.
Let's talk about Tampa Bay going on the road, though, and blowing out the Chargers. They go into SoFi Stadium. Jim Harbaugh, he's got friggin' Judge Judy there. We were really excited.
Yeah.
She was an honorary captain. And the Bucs just kind of took it to the Chargers. Are we more impressed with Tampa Bay or, more dissatisfied with what we saw from the Chargers?
I'm just impressed with how the game went for Tampa. They were behind early. The Chargers were controlling that game. They were behind and kind of reeling, and then they just kind of settled down. It was 17-13 at half, and they scored 24 points in the second half. And the plays that Baker was able to make down the field to Mike Evans. They struggled in the red zone. Chargers are a good red zone defense. So they said, the heck with that. We're not going to deal with the red zone. Threw a 57-yard touchdown, a 37-yard touchdown. So for them to be able to come back in that game and adapt and do what they needed to do was impressive. They're playing well.
Week 2, the Buccaneers beat the Lions. Week 4, they beat the Eagles. And we've been talking about how great both of those teams are, and the Bucs are 2-0 against those teams. And it's significant because they're coming back into that team that they were early in the season when they seemed to be destined to go deep in the playoffs. They've weathered a lot of injuries. They're still shorthanded. No Chris Godwin. He won't be back. But Mike Evans had best day of the season. He had the hamstring problem that knocked him out for several weeks. So they're peaking at the right time. They peaked too soon. They bottomed out, and now they're on the upswing. That's a dangerous team in the playoffs in the NFC.
It's a really dangerous team, and it's interesting. We talk about, who's the MVP? Is it Josh Allen? Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Saquon Barkley? A guy that isn't getting nearly any conversation around it, but should be in the conversation is Baker Mayfield. He's playing unbelievable this entire year. He goes on the road at Jim Harbaugh and at the Chargers, 22 of 27, 288 yards, 4 touchdowns. He does throw 1 pick. It's a 135 quarterback rating. His QBR is almost 95. He's playing as well as anyone. And to your point, he lost Chris Godwin. He lost Mike Evans for a month. Think about how they're doing this, right? So after Mike Evans, it's the rookie Jalen McMillan. They're getting some contributions from Cade Otton, their tight end. The running backs are all helping as well. But they've done a really nice job, and I think that all starts with Baker Mayfield. Coach, we've talked about before how a lot of times teams will take on the attitude of their quarterback. And it feels like the Buccaneers have bought it. Baker's got that swagger. He talks the talk, but he walks the walk. And it feels like Tampa Bay has really bought into him.
We laugh a lot about the word moxie as we describe quarterbacks. He's got it in spades now. That's what he is all about. And I think he's underappreciated as a passer. Watch him throw the ball. It's really, really impressive. Made a number of big throws to Evans down the field in that game. But the other part of it is Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator, there's balance. There's balance. The environment that he's playing is a lot better because they're running the football.
They might need another offensive coordinator next year.
Yeah.
They lose Dave Canales as head coach of the Panthers and Liam Cohen. There's already talk that he'll be one and done and a head coach somewhere next year.
And you know what? And I'm going to have a contrarian take about the Chargers here because I know the question was posed more impressed with the Buccaneers or disappointed with the Chargers. I know it's not a I know it's a bad loss for L.A. But think about what Jim Harbaugh's working with here and Justin Herbert's working with here. Their leading receiver was Ladd McConkey, a rookie wide receiver, Georgia, right? But came into this game banged up. He was a game-time decision. Their second leading receiver was Stone Smart, their backup tight end. Their third leading receiver was Quentin Johnson, who was a first-round pick last year, who some people last year were saying, is this guy a bust? And he's had some issues with drops so far this year. They don't have J.K. Dobbins. I feel like they're doing it a little bit with smoke and mirrors. And so, yes, they lost this game, but I actually think Coach Harbaugh has done an unbelievable job with the Chargers this year. And I think when you sort of look at who he's dealing with and what he's got to work with, he's done a really impressive job, and the future's bright in L.A.
Another coach that's done an awesome job this season, Sean Payton and the Broncos. They were able to battle back and get the win against the Colts. And you mentioned it kind of during the show. Bo Nix kind of showing that through adversity, how he can handle it. Part of it goes back to how many snaps he's taken in college, but he was able to show it tonight.
I'm amazed by the rookie quarterbacks in this league and how well they're playing. It's hard to play quarterback in the NFL, and for these rookies to step in, it's been impressive. And the two guys who have been most impressive to me are Jaden Daniels in Washington and Bo Nix in Denver. And both those guys over 50 starts as college players. So they're experienced guys. They've been through a lot of stuff. And the poise that they have and their ability to be resilient and come back. And we saw that with Nix today. I love the Bo Nix and Sean Payton relationship. They're both competitive, tough guys. And I think they make each other better. I know Sean's creating a really good environment for them, but their ability to play defense in Denver, been impressive. They made a number of big-time plays. The interception for a touchdown was huge for them. But I love the resiliency of Nix. They got a quarterback there in Denver for a long time.
Started 0-2, 9-3 since then. First 9-win season since 2016 for the Broncos. They haven't been back to the playoffs since they won Super Bowl 50. It's the longest drought ever in the Super Bowl era. And they're getting closer and closer. And Sean Payton's attitude is, we got bigger goals than that. This isn't a building block for next year. They're a team that could go on the road in the postseason and give better teams fits when we get into the single elimination, because Sean Payton's the master at coming up with the right game plan for that opponent to exploit whatever weaknesses he sees and outscore the opponent, which is what it's all about in the postseason. So Broncos could surprise a lot of people in January.
Let's talk more. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they are going to be a very tough out as well. The defense, I think, pick six for a touchdown, free wings, thank you, Applebee's, right? We always appreciate that. But they get to Anthony Richardson a couple times. They sack him twice, which is no easy feat, bringing down Anthony Richardson as well. And they get the couple of interceptions here as well. And I just want to say, to your point about Sean Payton, similar to what I was talking about with Coach Harbaugh, listen to some, Adam Trotman, Nate Adkins, the guys that, other than Cortland Sutton, it's not a lot of guys that are household names, and they're getting it done with a rookie quarterback and just a lot of different pieces finding roles for them.
Yeah, the common thread between those two guys is they've been head coaches before. They know what they want their roster to look like. So some of these guys that you're talking about, little no-name guys, but they're their kind of guys. I spent a day with Sean Payton in training camp, and he's like, I love this team. I love how young we are, how hungry we are. We love what these guys are all about. And they'll continue to build their discipline to building it the way they want to build it, and you're seeing the results.
Well, let's see the results of the playoff picture as it stands right now, Week 15. And to do that, we have Steve Kornacki. Kind of run us through the playoff picture, Steve.
Yeah, Maria. I mean, we were talking about coming into today the possibility that it would produce playoff chaos on the AFC side. Instead, we end the day with something approaching clarity here. What changed today? Even in defeat against the Eagles, the Steelers do lock up a playoff spot. Houston, with the win over Miami, getting a little bit of help with Indianapolis losing, they lock up the South. More clarity could be on the immediate horizon here. You got Pittsburgh paying a trip to Baltimore next weekend. If Pittsburgh wins that game, they lock up the AFC North. If Baltimore wins that game, they lock down a playoff spot and, of course, would be very much in the race to win the division. Also, more immediately, Thursday night, you're going to get Denver playing at the Chargers. If the Broncos win that game, the Broncos clinch the spot. They are very close right now mathematically. They would clinch it if they could win on Thursday. And then there is the case of the Indianapolis Colts. The reason why there wasn't chaos, why there's clarity, it's because of the missed opportunity today for the Colts. You see, falling against Denver. Remember, start of the third quarter of that game, looked like the Colts had scored to go ahead by 13. If the Colts had won this game, their chances of making the playoffs would be about 75% right now. Instead, that touchdown was called back. They collapse, they lose the game, and just a 15% chance at the Colts. This would be the cutoff line right now. The Colts making the playoffs at only 15%. What would it take to get the Colts in? Well, most realistically, it would be something like this. They need the Broncos to beat the Chargers this Thursday. If that were to happen, the Chargers would sit there at 8-7. Now, the Colts have 3 remaining games. The good news for the Colts, it's the easiest 3 games any team is finishing the season against. They got Titans, Giants, Jags. So if the Colts could win those 3, that would be 9 wins, 9-8. And then what would need to happen? They'd need the Chargers, if they're sitting there at 8-7, to lose one of their remaining 2 games. Sounds easy enough. Who are the Chargers playing, though, to close out the year? It's the Raiders and the Patriots. So realistically, unless the Chargers are dropping one of those games, the best chance the Colts had vanished this afternoon.
Appreciate it, Steve. We were actually joking on our way into the studio. It's like, we kind of need the Colts to win so Steve Kornacki can still continue to have the chaos in the AFC playoff picture instead of these teams locking it all up. All right, so that was Steve. That was the playoff picture. Let's get into the speed round, guys, to wrap up our podcast. And let's start with a fill-in-the-blank session. We are going to say the Ravens' biggest weakness is what, Matthew?
Their secondary. I mean, for the season, here's the list of teams that have given more passing yards per game. The Jaguars. That's it. It's a secondary. We know their offense can score. We know they got good run defense. It's their secondary.
I'm trying to make this concise, but it's impossible. The Ravens' biggest weakness is their habit of every once in a while being caught flat-footed and losing, because that happens. And when you don't expect it, boom, there it happens. It happens in Cleveland. It happens here. It happens to him in the playoffs. And it may happen to him again in the postseason.
Agree with both. For me, it's pass defense. We've been talking about it all year long. They're a good run defense. They can disrupt a little bit, but on the back end, bad teams have thrown for a lot of yards against them, and they have to play they got to keep up with them on offense, and that's not the way the Ravens want to play. They're really, really good on offense, but if they don't get that squared away at some point, they're going to have a hard time going the distance.
The Texans' ceiling is what?
Divisional round. Yeah, look, C.J. Stroud, I thought, played better today, right? They have Mixon. They have some nice spots on defense. But when you look around the AFC and you see some of these other super teams, I just don't see them getting out of the divisional round.
I don't even think it's divisional round this year.
It was ceiling. The question was their ceiling, not their floor.
They're at their ceiling. They're at their ceiling. They're not, and I'm not going to be as unequivocal as I could be, because I don't need this to be shoved down my throat in a few weeks, but I think T-shirts and hats are the ceiling. They got their T-shirts and hats today. That's the ceiling.
It's a good lesson for year 2 for everybody. It seemed easy for them last year. It's been a lot harder this year all across their team. I think for me, it's probably a road playoff win. I could see them winning a game at home if they get the opportunity to do that, but I don't see them going on the road in the playoffs.
It's the Ravens or the Chargers or the Broncos. That's the thing. This isn't the Browns last year with Joe Flacco.
You're right.
This is a team that is going to be better than them on paper.
Yeah, it'll be hard.
All right, the Commanders can go on a deep playoff run because
of 5. Jaden Daniels. That kid is special. Honestly, today's game, they got dominated on both sides of the line. He got sacked 8 times, and the only reason the Commanders won that game was because of Jaden Daniels. Just magic. And so they'll go as far as Jaden Daniels can take him. He needs help. He needs help on the line. He needs help besides Terry McLaurin. But if they go far, it'll be because of Jaden Daniels.
Well, they can go far in the playoffs because any team that makes it in the NFC can go far, because it feels wide open. The best team, if it is the Eagles, Commanders aren't going to flinch about having to go there and play them. They'd welcome the opportunity to end a special season for the Philadelphia Eagles. So the NFC being so wide open gives every team a chance to go deep.
To me, it's the marriage between Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels. I just think what Dan has brought there is really different for that franchise for a long, long time. I mean, there's this, he talks about brotherhood a lot. I think you see that. I think they're a resilient team. I think they've battled back through some adversity within games and over the course of this season. And then the quarterback is just simply off the charts. Just love him. I'm just amazed by his poise. I mean, athleticism, moving in the pocket, throwing the football, the maturity as a passer, the touch, the act, all that stuff. But at the end of it, just his poise as a person and as a player is pretty rare for such a young guy.
Okay, this is
special.
This is a complicated one. It's kind of like Mad Libs or whatever. But the team that will miss the playoffs that I wish made it in is blank because blank.
It's the Bengals because of Joe Burrow. I would love to see Joe Burrow in the playoffs, right? I mean, like that, they're going to miss the playoffs, but I wish they were in, because what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, honestly, the two of them are doing this year is really record-setting. It's unbelievable, and it should be appreciated on a national playoff stage. I wish they were in the postseason.
I mean, I hate to say the same thing, but I will, because in the postseason.
I'm right. You can say that.
Well, I have a different spin on it. In the postseason, Joe Burrow becomes even better.
Yeah.
He there are certain players who will crumble under that moment. He wants that moment. He relishes it. He thrives. He's the only active quarterback who's beaten Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. The only other guy that's done it is Tom Brady. So the best news for the Chiefs is they're most likely not going to have to worry about Joe Burrow.
You guys keep stealing my answers. I'm going to say Cincinnati. That's my answer number A, for the reasons you talked about, Joe Burrow, but also because Sims picked him to go to the Super Bowl. So just kind of alleviating his pain a little bit. I've been banging the drum for the 49ers all year long, thinking they're going to come out of their shell and do something, but obviously I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just a fan of their team and what they've done in recent years, but I don't think it's going to happen here in 2024, unfortunately.
All right, guys. Well, that is a wrap on Week 15. We got a little fire burning over here. We're going to go get cozy.
A little fire?
It's kind of big.
Huge.
I want to. Every time I notice it, I want to get up and run.
So we're going to go get warmed by the fire. You make sure you join us on our Football Night in America podcast. So there we go.
Incredible.
Shot.
That's the Yule log right there. Let's go.
Yes. We'll see you for
Five-alarm
Football Night in
fire.
America.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.